This is ContraZoom,
where we go back and forth about film.
I'm Dakota Arsenault.
And I'm Rachel Ho. We are back again for another installment of the A24 Retrospective series. So for the last entry in this series, it was episode 246, and that was for Ex Machina, which featured the fantastic Canadian director Jeremy Lalonde. For today's episode, we have someone just as wonderful and just as talented, and that is Jericho Tadeo. Jericho, did I say your last name right? Sorry.
You did, yes, you did.
Okay, thank you.
Curiously,
I'm going to do that again. I meant to ask you ahead of time.
No, because that's the actual pronunciation. But my dad, weirdly, he always said Tadeo, which I thought was weird because didn't this come from you? Thing? I don't know, but yeah, you said it right. Kudos to you.
You can keep this in Dakota, actually. Let's just keep going.
Love it. Yep.
So Jericho is the lead editor at MovieWeb, and he is an immensely talented writer who's also contributed to The Edge, The Nerd Daily, and many, many others. He is also the Asian Cut's resident critic at large. And if I'm going to speak on behalf of Rose, Alicia, and myself, we are very grateful for everything that he's done for the site. And I have genuinely been really enjoying getting to know Jericho over this last year. So finally, welcome to the podcast, Jericho. How are you doing today?
Thank you so much. I have never been introduced in such a way, so I'm going to cut that audio and then just play it whenever I meet somebody new because I think it was perfect. I am doing well. Thank you so much for having me.
No problem. We're excited to have you. Dakota, how are you?
I'm doing great. I'm very excited that Jericho is here. I like this continuation of us just basically pilfering your writers on the Asian Cut to come on here. It's been a great experience, and I really appreciate that so many of them wish to come on the podcast.
Wow, so I'm not the first?
Well, okay, you are the first that isn't me, Rose, or Alicia. So that, I think that says something.
Okay.
Because Rose and Alicia, they don't really count, do they? They're just...
Do they know
we did this together. We did this together. Jericho is the first proper writer. Like you, Rose and you and Rose knew each other from, I guess you guys worked together beforehand.
We have.
And that was how Jericho came to the Asian Cut. And I'll say this as if you're not here. He's been absolutely amazing. And then I'd say a few months ago, me and Alicia and Rose were talking, and we were saying how we wanted to incorporate Jericho more into the Asian Cut, but we didn't quite know how. And so we were tossing around different ideas of how we could bring him in and things like that. And then we rested on the term critic at large because we saw that I think the New York Times had it. So we were like, it's good enough for the New York Times. We're going to use that too.
Fancy.
So then we were like, Jericho's our critic at large. And it sounds impressive.
It's so impressive. And I was so excited. But then, there's also the part of me that's 30 years old and was like, more work? What do you mean? But no, it's been very exciting to be more closely working more closely with you, Rose and Alicia, because you guys are wonderful.
Thank you. And I feel like you get it. Most people I think who do write for the Asian Cut get it, but it's you kind of get the idea of why we started it and why we want to keep doing it as well. Because, you share the same frustration. We've talked about it before, where we kind of have the same frustrations about a lot of outlets just not really taking in Asian-centric projects. They love Asian-centric products, though. Everybody loves those. But yeah, so it's been really great to have you on, and I'm excited that we finally got you on the podcast because you were, I think actually, I'm going to actually admit here, I think Dakota, it was your idea to get Jericho on.
I think so. I think we were talking, because we try to bring in new guests all the time for this A24 retrospective series. I think I was just thinking of people who might be of interest to us. And I was like, hey, anyone from the Asian Cut, maybe someone like Jericho would be potentially interested. And you were like, yeah, I'll reach out to him and see what he has to say. And that was a while ago, a few months ago, if I remember correctly, because we usually try to plan these out a little bit in advance to kind of give some heads up. We do have calendar that we kind of have to work around a little bit as far as festivals and award seasons go. So fitting in A24 retrospective episodes can sometimes be a little tricky.
Yeah, so I'll admit, Jericho, it wasn't my idea. I do really like you, though. But as you,
so you didn't want me on here.
But as you heard from us talking before we got onto this, I'm barely here. My brain is just not working at all. I'm just not even thinking most of the time. Anyways, why don't we get to it? So I actually don't think I mentioned this week's episode for A24 Retrospective is going to be on Slow West, which was a movie that came out in 2015. But as always, before we get into actually talking about the movie, we have a new guest on, a new host. I guess not a new host, new guest on. So we'll go over the A24 4 questions. So let's start with the first one. Jericho, what are your top 3 A24 movies?
Okay, so I spent countless hours mulling this over, and I'm pretty sure I'm not the first one who said this. It's just such a hard question to answer. And I will preface by saying I have not seen Past Lives yet, so I feel like my 3 will change when I see that. And yesterday, it came out on VOD, so bear with me on my list. But at number 3, I have Close. I think it's like a Belgian-French movie about the 2 kids. I don't know. It just spoke to my childhood, and I, of course, researched it after, and everyone was saying how it was emotionally manipulative, which I don't understand as a criticism because
that's the point.
That's the point of movies. Every movie does that. But yeah, that's one of my top 3. And then, of course, Moonlight. Moonlight was like one of the biggest A24 films for me that really opened my mind to, like, I guess, cinema and its capabilities. And then number 1, not just my favorite A24 film, but my absolute favorite film ever is Under the Skin.
Oh.
I had Under the Skin in my top 3, and I will say Close was in my top 10 last year.
It was, yeah.
For movies generally. I loved those ones as well. And I love Moonlight too, like, don't get me wrong. I love those. But I'm fantastic choices, but I am also very excited for you to watch Past Lives, because Dakota
I am so scared to watch Past Lives.
Yeah, I just watched it last night. Yeah.
Oh my
I think
gosh.
you're gonna love it. It's not as Dakota, you can say it's not as sad as people think it is.
I thought it was gonna be way sadder. Yeah.
Yeah, it's not. I think they did quite the number on the trailer of making it look like this really devastating romance, but it's not. I don't think it's a sad movie per se. But anyways, no, I think those choices that you made are absolutely excellent. What was it about Under the Skin that really got you?
I don't know. I watched it at TIFF when it was here. I think it was 2013, 14, and I was a baby. It was just, I hated it at first. I was like, what the hell did I just watch? This was a waste of my time and money. And then when it came out on hard media, I bought it and I rewatched it. And now it's a film that I return to whenever I question, like, my line of work or what the point of me writing about movies is. Under the Skin just sort of reinforces, just because, I don't know, it's just like Scarlett Johansson's alien learning about herself. And I think at the time, and even now, I can still relate to that point of self-discovery. I also wrote my thesis on Under the Skin and Scarlett Johansson as an actress and a celebrity in, like, the early 2010s. I thought Under the Skin was very indicative of her career path. So yeah, I spent a lot of time with Under the Skin.
What made you want to get it on DVD if you didn't like it so much when you first watched it at TIFF?
I think it was, oh my gosh, that was like 10 years ago. I don't know. I think maybe it would have been a mix of people saying it was really good, or it was because Scarlett Johansson, like, I wasn't really paying attention to her until I saw The Winter Soldier, and I was like, okay, I kind of like you. So whenever I find an actor that I really like, I go back and, like, watch their filmography just to know more of their work. And so maybe that it was like a compounded thing.
I've done it before where there's movies that I just really don't like, but I kind of like, I have an inkling that there's something about the movie that is very good. And not very good, but like something that's interesting about it. And so it compels me to go back, even though I really like Ad Astra is that for me. I really didn't like Ad Astra when I first saw it. And then I don't know why, but something just kind of compelled me 2 years later to watch it again. And then I loved it. And now I like it's one of my favorite Brad Pitt movies. That's very interesting though. Okay. So the next question is, what was your introduction to A24?
Wait, so you're not going to tell me your top 3?
Oh gosh, I think my top 3 was Under the Skin, Locke, Enemy. It's just so like really like those are the 3 that I gave when we did this the very first time. I probably kick maybe Lockout now for Past Lives. I actually think I would kick Lockout for Past Lives.
Okay.
Yeah.
What about you, Dakota?
I don't remember what my original answer was, but based on my Letterboxd ranking, it is Last Black Man San Francisco, A Ghost Story, and Ex Machina.
Oh, Ex Machina. No, maybe I did. Did I put that in?
Those are good choices.
Yeah, there is very few wrong answers. There are wrong answers, but
there are wrong
few.
answers. Doing this
series... Wait, what would have been a wrong answer?
Oh, like what was this? Like, what was the very first one called? The Charlie Sheen one?
Yeah, A Glimpse Inside the Mind of Charles Swan III.
That is a wrong answer. Yeah, that is absolutely a wrong answer.
Because of Charlie Sheen?
Like, no, it's just not a good movie. Like, it's nothing to do with him. It's just not a good movie. But like doing this series, I have to say, like, we all kind of put A24 on a certain kind of pedestal, but then when you actually watch all of their movies, it's like there's no way every single movie they put out can be a hit, right? Like, but you realize they did have a number of really crappy movies that they did put out, especially in the very, very early days, where they're still trying to figure out, I guess, the tone of the company and like the vibe that they want to project out there. So as they're figuring that out and they're kind of just accepting whatever movie that they can get, those movies at the very, very beginning aren't the greatest. There's another one that I really didn't like, and I can't remember
Revenge of the Green Dragons.
That was a really shitty movie, and now it's so upsetting because that's like the only Asian movie they did at that point.
I don't know.
There are some bad ones though.
Spring Breakers, I know you really hate it.
There was one that I just really couldn't stand. I can't remember. I didn't like Spring Breakers, but that I didn't hate it. Oh no, I don't know. There's been some that I have. Oh, Tusk.
Oh yeah, you didn't even do that episode.
I didn't. I literally stepped away from the episode, Jared. Yeah. I was like, "You guys go ahead. I don't even want to waste an hour of my time talking about this movie." I was just so not into it. And yeah, there's been a few that just weren't great. Cut Bank. That was a recent one that we did with Daniel Grant.
Yeah, that was a real rough one.
That wasn't a good one either. So there are wrong answers to this question, but I think there are more correct answers than wrong answers. Let us move on now. So Jericho, introduction to A24. Do you remember?
I do, but okay. So my introduction was the Bling Ring, but not knowing what A24 was. And then it wasn't until Under the Skin, what was another early 2010s? But yeah, so it was
those ones.
Yeah, it was like a gradual recognition of A24. I would just see like the logo play in front of the movie, and it was like, okay. As soon as I would see the logo, I'd be like, okay, this one's gonna devastate me. Great. But yeah, the Bling Ring was my introduction, and that was because I watched that because I am a Sofia Coppola fan.
Woo!
Oh. Dakota really likes. He's a big Sophia head. Yeah, that's what you guys call yourselves. No. She's all right. I don't mind her. She's okay.
Yeah, we gotta come up with a name for
Sophia heads. That works. What's the problem with that?
Yeah, hashtag Sophia heads.
Could be taken the wrong way. I find a lot of people kind of share a very, and that was my experience too, which is like you start watching these movies and you don't necessarily think, oh, I'm going to go watch a new now that's their reputation is like, oh, a new A24 is out, so let's go catch it. Or at least like you're interested in it, it's on your radar. But there was a time, and it's usually about the same time period, depending on how old you are and how into movies you were back then. But you just start watching not the same movie, but you start watching these movies because you're just interested in them. And then you start to notice that, oh, the same logo keeps popping up. And then eventually now, and like, that's how they built their brand though, I suppose, because now I heard, was it at South by last year or maybe 2 years ago? Oh, it wouldn't have been 2 years ago. I guess last year, I think it was South by Southwest. People were talking about how when the A24 logo came out, like the crowd was cheering for it, which I find really, really weird. But at the same time, like I think they've done a really great job with one, curating their films, but also two, just the marketing in general for the brand, because they've done a really good job about that.
Yeah, and now it's like if you see the logo in a trailer, it kind of just solidifies, or like you feel at least somewhat assured that, okay, this is going to be at least decent, more likely.
Yes, and there's something about their logo too, because it has that old filmy quality to it. So it kind of puts you in a different mood than, even, I mean, the studios that have been around for ages, like Warner Brothers and Columbia and Disney, their logos now are so sharp and so digital looking that it kind of takes you out of it. But like the A24 logo, it has this nice gritty quality to it that reminds you just of like movies when you're a bit younger.
Yeah, it's like a pat on the back, like you'll be okay.
It's like a warm blanket around your shoulders.
Yeah, or a hot coffee.
All right, this is my favorite question of the 4 questions, and I'm very curious to hear what your answer is. So, Jericho, which director, dead or alive, do you think would make a good A24 movie?
Okay, so this one was also hard because I had multiple answers, and because I thought I had to give 3, but then I misread your email. I know, so I was like, okay, now I have to pick one. So my pick is Isabel Sandoval. Oh. She did Lingua Franca, and I think, I don't know, that movie was just so sharp and empathetic and devastating, but also really cool in a way. So I think she'd be great.
Yeah, I think that's a great pick, and I'm honestly surprised. I feel like she had so much buzz behind her and hasn't really done a ton since her debut film. Like, I think she's done a couple shorts and stuff like that, but I would not be shocked in the slightest to see if A24 scoops up one of her movies in the future.
I'm hoping.
I'm not overly familiar with her, but I will have to check her out a little bit. That's interesting. See, I knew you'd give a good pick for that one, Jericho. I knew, I had faith. I was like, I had faith that Jericho's going to have a really interesting answer. Won't just be like Chris Nolan. No offense if somebody did say Chris Nolan, because I think somebody has.
Somebody said Chris Nolan?
I feel like that was an answer at some point.
I don't have... I keep track of everyone's answers, and I didn't start keeping track until after we did about 5 of them. So unless someone from the really early episodes did, no one has said Chris Nolan, but I cannot remember if that's the case or not.
Okay. I'm going to stop talking just in case somebody did, because I'm going to feel bad if somebody did say that.
They're not coming back.
There's a wrong answer, see, for that. No, there's not. I mean, I guess, like, Insomnia could have been, or like, even Memento, that could have been an A24 movie.
Oh, yeah, anyway. 100%.
Okay, and so the last question here, Jericho, what do you think makes an A24 movie?
I think it's ability to be anything it wants to be on a formal level, while still somehow, no matter the genre, story, or direction, it still somehow completely eviscerates you. That is my experience with A24 films. I don't know if it's because I just naturally gravitate towards sad things, but that is my definition of an A24 film.
I like that. Eviscerates is a really good word for A24 movies, I think.
Yeah.
And I'm with you. I gravitate towards like darker things that are going to put you in a bit of a down mood. I don't know why, but maybe that's why we get along, Jericho. Because
Right?
we're both just looking for really downer material to watch. But
I mean, like, how else would you want to experience those things? Like, I don't want to do that in real life.
it is true, yeah. And it's like when I see like happy stuff, I'm like, what's wrong with them? It feels so false to me that somebody could be that happy in real life. It's just like, that's not real. But give me something really devastating, I'd be like, yeah, that's more relatable. See, I act like I've like led a really tough life. I haven't. I've led a very, very easy and soft life. Maybe that's why, though, because you're right. It's easier to see that kind of thing in a movie than actually go through it in real life. So
Exactly.
Well, thank you, Jericho. Those are amazing answers, and I never had a doubt. I never had a doubt that you were going to give us some good stuff to work with. So thank you.
Once upon a time, Jay Cavendish travelled from the cold shoulder of Scotland to the baking heart of America to find his love. A jackrabbit in a den of wolves.
Arms abroad, boy.
Sir, I'm Jay Cavendish, son of Lady Cavendish.
We're all sons of bitch.
Keep heading west solo. You'll be dead by dawn.
I take care of myself.
Sure, kid. You need chaperoning. Let's drift.
Care not why I'm headed west.
No.
So let us get the episode continuing, and we're gonna, like I said, we're looking at Slow West today, which came out in 2015. It was directed by John Maclean, not of Die Hard, just a Scottish man named John Maclean, and starring Kodi Smit-McPhee, Michael Fassbender, Ben Mendelsohn, and Karen Pistorius. As the title of the film would suggest, Slow West is a Western film, and it follows a bounty hunter named Silas, who's played by Michael Fassbender, and a young Scotsman named Jay, who's played by Kodi Smit-McPhee. The two of them, for very separate reasons, are making their way through the American West and are in search of Rose, who is Karen Pistorius' character. The movie goes between the past, the present, and a few dream sequences as well. And I would describe it as like a whimsical Western, which I find very interesting, and we can get into that later. Slow West had its premiere during the 2015 Sundance Film Festival, and it was received incredibly well at that festival as well. I had a really good time reading some of the reviews that came out of it because people were so excited for this movie. And it was actually purchased by A24 ahead of the festival in December, knowing that I think that it had already gotten a spot over at Sundance. So usually I think we find that A24 purchases a lot of their films in the middle of festivals, like Sundance, TIFF is another one, South by. But this was one that it happened just ahead of it, so that's kind of neat. I think, actually, first of all, I want to start the discussion with, how do you guys feel about Western films, generally speaking? Like, just the genres. Is it a genre that you guys gravitate towards? Dakota, why don't we start with you?
Sure, yeah. Westerns is such a unique genre where obviously it was most popular in the 40s, 50s, and 60s, and then it really fell off hard because it just wasn't popular anymore with the rise of sci-fi. And it's so, there's two different kinds of Westerns, really, because you could basically boil down every Western to a regular Western and then an anti-Western. And I feel like, unfortunately, with a lot of the OG Westerns, you get a lot of things that are sort of associated with very conservative ideals. Things like misogyny, toxic masculinity, issues and hatred towards indigenous people. All this sort of stuff is really central themes to a lot of Westerns. So it makes them really tough to watch, especially looking through them with today's lenses. I enjoy some of them, but I feel like kind of like, it's kind of, people call comic book movies the Westerns of yesteryear sort of thing. So it's like the same, how you'll get, one good comic book movie and then 50 crap ones. And that's sort of the same way with Westerns. There's some great absolute classics, Searchers, High Noon, stuff like that. And I do really like those. But most of the John Wayne movies are just crap in my opinion. That said, the anti-westerns, the stuff that sort of started with, you know, Unforgiven, obviously there were other anti-westerns before that, McCabe and Mrs. Miller, stuff like that. I'm really a big fan of that because I like how it really inverts the genre on its head of what we expect a traditional Western to be. And that's pretty much all it is you expect a Western to be this. Instead, we're going to be a little bit different, and now it's an anti-Western. And I really love those. I think the look is, you know, some of the most beautifully shot films are Westerns. They just the way of capturing the expanse land is always done so beautifully, no matter the season or where it takes place. It's always stunning. So I have this real love-hate relationship with them where I kind of want to watch more, but also I don't really want to get into the weeds of these really terrible, racist old ones. So it's a weird sort of conundrum I'm in. New Westerns, I'm all for it. Give me more of them.
Jericho, how about you?
Yeah, to echo Dakota's point about the conservatism of like the older Westerns. I remember I took in university an American studio film class. And so there was like a good chunk where we did watch like the John Waynes of cinema. And I try not to watch old films with a modern lens as much as I can, but you can't escape the cringe sometimes, or just the how uncomfortable certain parts are. And so, yeah, Western is not, it's not a genre that I gravitate towards. And then when you told me this was the movie, I was like, she's really testing me. She really wants to know what I can talk about.
And
like I thought it was on purpose. I thought it was on purpose. And then and I was like, oh no. And then I looked through your past episodes and I was like, oh, they're going in chronological order. It's not, it's not personal. Not everything is about me.
Imagine it was, though, Jericho. Imagine it was. I could have.
Listen, I am prepared. My therapist says I have anxiety, but I am prepared.
Could have waited for you. We could have waited for you to do like any of the other ones coming up next. It didn't have to do this one. So you never know. You never know. I share the same thoughts with you guys about Westerns. It's never been a genre that I'm that interested in. Even the modern stuff, I think, is better than the older stuff. However, I do see the appeal of the older, the more classic Westerns. I do understand why they became as popular as they did. I'm very interested in Western as a genre as more of like an academic thing, because Dakota, you brought up the point of a lot of people saying, you know, superhero movies of today are kind of the Westerns of back then. And I find that a really interesting comparison to the two, because somebody recently with Blue Beetle that had just come out, the main criticism that I've seen from Blue Beetle is that it followed a very, very formulaic origin story. And somebody on Twitter, I don't know who it was, but they just said, yeah, but like, would you criticize a Western movie for having like cowboy hats and like a shootout and that kind of thing? Like, there are just certain things that happen in these types of movies. And I thought that was a very interesting comparison, but neither here nor there. So the thing with Slow West that I find pretty fascinating is that it is a Western. It is a modern Western. However, there is, I described it as a whimsical Western because it is not like a classic Western. I wouldn't even say it's like a modern Western. I've never seen a Western film that was done in this way. And it really worked for me. But Jericho, how did it work for you? I guess first of all, we'll start with, did you find that it is done in a very different way, like markedly different? And did it work for you? If so.
Yeah, even within the first, 5-10 minutes, I was like, this is not what I expected. Because I didn't really look into what the film was about. I didn't watch any trailers or research it at all. I wanted to go in completely blind because I hadn't even heard of this film until you invited me onto this podcast. So I was like, I have no idea what to expect. I know it's a Western. And then when it started playing, I was like, oh yeah, this is not, like, to your point, it is very whimsical. And it's, I was sucked in. I was like, I think I'm going to like this.
Dakota, how about you?
Yeah, I think they did John Maclean did a really good job of acknowledging the sort of past history of Western films. And the treatment of segments of people, but then also sort of, flipping it on its head a little bit, where, we get a scene early on where Kodi Smit-McPhee's character, when we first actually meet him with Michael Fassbender, when they first meet each other, it's when he's run into some Southern Army soldiers. So right away we get that point of the Southern Army. So this is post Civil War, and they are chasing down an indigenous person, and we get this scene of what we think of the indigenous person being shot to death by the other soldiers, and it later turns out that wasn't the case. But we get this little acknowledgement of this is what the time was like. And then we get another scene later on where they're riding through horseback, and Jay and Silas come across these black Creole old men who are singing a French song. Kodi Smit-McPhee speaks French, or his character does at least, and so he responds to them in French. And so we get that little bit of history. And then later on, we also get another scene when we finally see Rose and her family. They are working with another indigenous person who speaks somewhat minimal English. Speaking of hot coffee, there's someone who orders hot coffee and hates hot coffee. That's a throwback to before we were recording there with Jericho. So we get all these nice little hallmarks of, hey, we're acknowledging, what it probably really was like at the time, while we're also sort of including the tropes that were present in these older Western films while still subverting them at the same time.
That's a really good way to say it. I think, yeah, it's all the callbacks to the history of the Western. I have to admit, I don't think I really appreciated it while I was watching it, but they do it when you said it, I was like, that is absolutely what they were doing, what John Maclean is doing in this movie. And this is surprisingly, I was looking up John Maclean. It's like, this is his first movie, but also his only movie that he's directed.
I was shocked.
Yeah,
this movie is so good.
He does such and it's such an assured hand, directing a film like this. And then, when I think about more of the references that it is making to cinema history, really, and also just American history too, for a Scottish guy to be able to pull from those things as well. That's just a really confident director to me, and somebody who I think has a very, very good command of his craft. And I think he shows that well. So I'm surprised that this is the one and only film that he's done. I assume he's probably got other things going on as well. I know he did some television and things, but in terms of cinematic, I'm very surprised. I'm surprised that he's only done this one.
Yeah, from what I can tell, he was a musician. He was in a fairly popular rock band in the 90s and 2000s. And then I guess they broke up, or it ended. And then he made a couple shorts with Michael Fassbender, and has directed a couple music videos as well. But what is he doing? What else is he doing? I need to see another John Maclean movie. It was incredible, his direction.
Isn't it funny though how we look at a great movie like this, and any of us would have been extremely pleased with ourselves if we had directed a movie like this and it ended up that way. But yet when we look at it, we go, oh, that's great. But what else are you going to do? We're not just content with saying good job on this one amazing thing that you've done. We're no, keep going, because, well, it's a compliment to him, really. Mm-hmm. You brought up Fassbender, though. Let's talk about the two lead performances. So we've got Kodi Smit-McPhee, who is an Australian, and Michael Fassbender, who is a good old Irishman. So Kodi Smit-McPhee is playing a young Scot, and at first I wasn't really buying his accent, I have to admit, but then as it went on, I realized he's not doing the really kind of the stereotypical Scottish accent, which he shouldn't be. There's very many different types of accents in the country. But the two of them, I really loved their chemistry together. They had so many different dynamics at play, big brother, little brother, but also, enemy and what's the other, two enemies, two people who are enemies with each other. You know what I mean? They were foes at one point, but they're also friends at one point. And they also have a real, towards the end of the film, especially, they have a real respect. And particularly Silas, Michael Fassbender's character, eventually takes on quite a caregiver attitude towards Jay, But Jericho, how do you find those two lead performances in particular?
I kept hoping that this was their love story. Just because, like,
it could have been, actually. Yeah, that could have been.
Like, watching this for the first time, I could not get out of my mind Kodi Smit-McPhee from The Power of the Dog. And then, like, one of my favorite Westerns, Brokeback Mountain. So I was like, please let this be the love story, because I did love their chemistry. There was an ease to, even though they're strangers, and I believe they've worked together before, so maybe, I don't know where that falls in with X-Men, but I loved their dynamic, and I was hoping that they were going to fall in love. Maybe that's my fan fiction.
There you go. Write that movie.
I did find it interesting because, like, when you were talking about how John Maclean is Scottish, and then this story is so, like, it's so set in America, but like the key players, like Fassbender, Smit-McPhee, and Maclean, neither of them are American. So I thought that was a really interesting element to it, in the way that it sort of revises the genre, and then you have these people who aren't necessarily from the country.
I mean, even add on to that Ben Mendelsohn, who we haven't talked about yet, but he's Australian. He's Australian. Karen Pistorius is South African, Kiwi. So nobody is really American.
And shot in New Zealand too, just like Power of the Dog.
Yeah, and which I do get that, but one thing I found was funny about John Maclean was he said, you know, yeah, we'll film the American outback in New Zealand, and that's fine. But for him, like, filming, he is Scottish, so I suppose he's allowed to say this, but it's like the scenes that were in Scotland were actually done in Scotland, because he was like, you can't replicate Scotland. He's so like, you can't replicate Scotland, but like the American outback, it's fine. We will just do that in New Zealand, which I thought was very funny. Dakota, though, how'd you find Kodi and Michael, our buddies, Kodi and Mike?
I love their performances. This, I feel like, was in the era of Michael Fassbender, was like at his absolute height, where everything he was turning out was just like the best performance you had ever seen. And then he'd come out with another movie. You're like, no, this is the best performance you've ever seen. And so it really showed his range at the time. And I really liked him in this movie because he does have, as you were describing, a very interesting dynamic with the Jay character, where at times it's, you know, very parental, sometimes it's like a sibling rivalry, sometimes it's like an antagonist, where you can't really figure out what the relationship is supposed to be. And even the whole time, you're also not too sure what his true motivations are. You sort of mentioned it off the top, where both Silas and Jay are looking for this young girl named Rose. And a bit of backstory is, the Kodi Smit-McPhee character, Jay, has followed her over from Scotland because he's in love with her, but he's several years younger, and at the time it was an unrequited love, but he's going to show up basically on her porch and be like, hey, I'm the man that you should marry, sort of thing, even though he's like a young teenager, and an old teenager, and she's a young adult, so there is a bit of an age gap, but not a ton. But when you're that age, it seems like you might as well be 100 years apart. And then you've got the Michael Fassbender character, who may or may not still be a bounty hunter, and you're not totally sure what his motivations are, and he comes across a wanted poster saying $2,000, dead or alive, Rose and her father, who's played by the Hound, Roy McCann from Game of Thrones, in a very nice, sweet role by him. And so it's sort of interesting where the audience thinks they might know Silas's intentions better than Jay does, and we're kind of left wondering the whole time, is he going to betray Jay or not? And so it's a very interesting dynamic where every action, when he's being nice, is he being manipulative? When he's angry at him, is he showing his true colors? What's going on? And so it's a really nice, well-balanced, layered performance from Fassbender. And Smit-McPhee, I agree, his accent is a little rough at times. It kind of hinges a little British, sometimes Scottish. You're not really sure what's going on. But I will allege that, you know, Smit-McPhee has had a run as probably one of the greatest young actors ever. He is, I know I sound like I'm being hyperbolic here, but he's such a great actor. And once again, just showing his range and his talent here. And I think Power of the Dog, which, you know, almost a decade later he makes, is a very natural progression of these two Western characters of a young man who is in love, heartbroken, unsure of himself, trying to be confident, all this sort of stuff. And Smit-McPhee does that so well.
Yeah, he's such an interesting actor.
I think he is just as talented as Timothée Chalamet, but for some reason does not receive the same. Actually, I say for some reason.
It's because he's kind of weird looking.
It's his look.
Which I love.
I was going to say, I think his face, because it is such an interesting looking face, that is going to serve him so well, just because as he gets older and that face continues to mature, he's going to be able to, I think, we've seen him do, I wouldn't call them leading man roles, but like straight roles. Like they're not the quote unquote character roles. But I think that as he gets older, he's going to have that option to do more character acting, which he wouldn't be able to do really if he were this kind of dashing looking young man with a very kind of prototypical face, because he has such an interesting look to him. And I think that that's what makes him an actor that is going to continue past, not to say that Chalamet's career is going to end like anytime soon, but I think it'll serve him really well in terms of his longevity compared to maybe some of his contemporaries right now who maybe he's losing jobs out to. I don't know. But I think that he has a really, really good potential like path for him. And I think he's fantastic. And he also has the best line in the Elvis movie where he's like, talking about how Elvis is white. He's like, he's white? It's great. Good old... I will always remember him for that because that is one of the stupidest lines ever in a movie. But anyways, the person I wanted to showcase a little bit. So Karen Pistoria, she is really great in the film as well. And I don't want to take anything away from hers too. But Ben Mendelsohn is an actor who
Speaking of character actors...
He's so good. I adore him so much. And he is one of the great, great character actors. But the funny thing to me is he doesn't even I don't think he needs to be a character actor. Like in terms of, usually character actors are people who can't be leading men. For like a Chris Pine he won't
can
be
never
a lead.
Be a character man.
Exactly. Whereas Ben Mendelsohn, though, I'm like, I feel like he could have done that if he wanted to. And maybe he did, like when he was in Australia doing more local productions and things like that. Maybe that's what he was going to get put in. But in Hollywood, he is known to be one of the best character actors. And I adore him. I think anytime I hear that he's in a movie, I'm very interested. Even like with the Marvel stuff, he like got me interested in Marvel again because I was like, oh, Ben Mendelsohn's in it. That's really interesting. My favorite scene of him in this movie is when he shows up right at the end at Rose's house and he just has this massive fur coat on and he looks like such a pimp. And I love it.
Yeah.
I love that shot of him just walking in and they kind of shoot him like up. So he just looks huge as well in that. But I think he's absolutely phenomenal in this movie. And I just want to spend a bit of time to talk about the great Ben Mendelsohn and his performance. So Dakota, I'll go to you first, just because you mentioned him being one of the great character actors as well.
Yeah, he's so flamboyant in this movie in almost a subtle, subdued way, which seems like an oxymoron, but having that coat really helps. It's so contrast because Michael Fassbender has a very stereotypical, we'll call it hot cowboy look. And Ben Mendelsohn on the flip side is like, no, I'm going to have the big puffy fur coat. I'm going to have a big wide brim hat. You're going to know my presence. You know that I'm the leader of this gang. And that's a lot of swagger to, put upon an actor to uphold. And Ben Mendelsohn is someone that's always able to pull it off where, he's got this grimace to him where you're like, I'm intimidated by you, but I don't know if I should respect your intimidation, or if I should be like crapping my pants by how scared I should be. And he balances that line so well. And once again, like he doesn't have a ton of scenes in this movie, but every time he shows up, you just can't help but stare at him. And this is, saying a lot considering it also stars Michael Fassbender and Kodi Smit-McPhee, which we've now talked about for several minutes about how great they are in this movie and what great presence they have on screen, and how Ben Mendelsohn could show up, barely say anything, and just steal the scenes he's in.
Yeah, very well said. Jericho?
I totally agree. I think, well, first of all, I think Ben Mendelsohn's voice is epic, and I would listen to him read anything. The phone book for you kids out there. I did have a thought though after I'd finished the film, because I did feel that his character was, uh, I don't know if underutilized would be the word, or just on the smaller side, but I feel like a different actor, like that character would have disappeared if it weren't Ben. And
That's a good point.
it's a testament to his skill, but I did want more from the character. That was my thought.
I always feel like that's kind of like well, one, it's a real compliment to the character, to the actor first off, but also it's like, in a way, I wonder with his character, if we had gotten more of him, does it lose the impact that we had with him just showing up every now and then? Because as Dakota, as you said, he is so flamboyant in this one in comparison to everybody else around him. So do you lose any of that impact? But then at the same time, I would say it's Ben Mendelsohn, and I don't think that we would ever say
no.
Yeah, you would never be like, oh, too much Ben Mendelsohn, I don't like this. You'd always welcome it. But I always do find it interesting when you do see a character on the screen and you're like, oh, I wish I knew more about you, because there's, on one hand, the characters that you're like, I wish I knew more about you, and I wish they had dropped all these other things, like all these other subplots in the movie, and just focus on you because you're the most interesting thing there, versus I just wanted to see more of you because you're just really interesting. But it's not quite the same thing, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and I think, I don't know, it's usually the case with like stacked casts. Like Rory's character, I was like, what, he's just dead now?
Yeah, it's true. Yeah, we didn't even talk about him. Yeah, he just died. Rory McCain, who plays John, is it John? Yeah, it plays.
He's hammering a fence and he gets shot like a motherfucker, and it's like, he's just gone. And I was like, what? You're not going to do this to the Hound.
I loved his Scottish accent, actually. Is he Scottish? No.
I think he's just
He
British.
Is Scottish, yeah.
He is Scottish. Oh, interesting.
No wonder it's so good. It's like, he's got a great Scottish accent. I was like, wow. Yeah,
Can you imagine you thought it was bad?
Like, it could use a little bit of work. But no, it is this movie is, I'm kind of surprised how under the radar this movie is. And maybe I just say that because I hadn't heard of it really. And Jericho, you said the same thing. But it is one of those that it doesn't get discussed very much when you're talking about A24's catalog, or even just Westerns in general. I feel like it doesn't get talked about enough because this is such an interesting film, and the amount of great performances that are in it from top to bottom, everybody, it's like, and we kind of brought up Chris Nolan before, but it's kind of like a Chris Nolan movie where he even the smallest role, he will cast a big actor in it. One, he's Chris Nolan and he can do that. But this movie kind of feels the same way, where it's like, even the roles that are a little bit small, he casts somebody so perfect for it, and not necessarily high profile, not necessarily like a big Hollywood actor, but just a really a known face, a known name, and somebody who does so well, and then you're just like, I want to see more. And I think that that's a really good testament to any movie. Really. Does anybody have anything else that they want to say about performances rather, before I move on?
Just that they all ate.
Well said. No, I'm there's definitely some filmmaking stuff I want to talk about. So yeah, I'm done with the performance aspect. All
right. So Dakota, you mentioned at the top, one of the things with Westerns is that they are shot incredibly well. And I think that is something with the cinematography in this one is absolutely outstanding. It is the cinematographers, Robbie Ryan, who has worked with Noah Baumbach, Yorgos Lanthimos, Ken Loach. He's done a lot of really great stuff. And he actually did Ginger and Rosa, which is a A24 that we had talked about.
That's so funny because I was watching this and there's several split diopter shots. I'm just like, this kind of reminds me of Ginger and Rosa.
There you go. Yeah, there you go. It's the same guy. The thing I find, like, we said this is just, it's not your typical Western. And I think the cinematography has everything to do with it. And I think the music does as well. And we can talk about the music later. But I think the cinematography does a lot of the heavy lifting in turning this Western from a classic Western, a modern Western, into something that is entirely its own thing. We kind of all agreed that this is a different type of Western. It's whimsical, as was the word that I wanted to use. But Dakota, since you wanted to get into the film, like, what is it about the cinematography specifically do you think changed this movie from being a kind of a very run-of-the-mill Western into being something a little bit special?
Oh, that's tough. There's a few specific moments which I think has more to do with the writing than the actual cinematography. Obviously, the way it was shot is key to unlocking that. But as far as the actual cinematography goes, I don't know. I think just about every Western is beautifully shot because you are using nature to really frame everything. And, towards the end of the movie, when they finally find Rose and her dad, and it's just this house in the middle of a wheat field with the mountains behind it, and the way everything is just framed so perfectly, it felt a bit like a Terrence Malick movie. It felt like Days of Heaven to me. If that was an inspiration to it, I don't know. But it's just shots like that where you're going through the solitary nature of, going through a forest or, a campsite with literally nothing around you, or the mountains. I don't know. Since moving out to Vancouver, I think, just framing the mountains behind you just makes everything look way better. So I don't know if that's much of a trick, or just being like, hey, point the camera at that big, beautiful rock.
Yeah, fair enough. Jericho?
Like, when you said that the cinematography does a lot of the heavy lifting, I felt the same. I thought, while I was watching it, I was trying to figure out where in America is this, because this is too beautiful. And then
New Zealand.
I know. So I was like, America could fucking never. So it's my experience with Western films, limited as it is that a lot of the times the landscape is depicted as like this heaven. Like, it's so beautiful. It's almost like a character on its own, and everyone wants to be there. Everybody wants to thrive there. And with this film, because it does play into that sort of capitalist endeavors, I thought what was interesting was how the landscape often echoed what the characters are going through in a way that I hadn't seen before in like an old Western. And so it wasn't so much like the land is this great thing and it's free, but more so it's utilized to sort of emphasize what Jay and Silas specifically are going through. And so I was like, yeah, this is so beautiful. It's very interesting the way some of the one scene that comes to mind is when they wake up and the river's back, and that's like sort of like a new beginning for Silas. Like, his gun is washed away, and then I don't think after that he fires a gun or kills anybody. So I thought that was it was interesting.
Oh, that's a good observation. For me, it was. And I am very willing to be corrected by people who have watched more Westerns than I have, because I'm like Jericho, I haven't watched enough to really make an educated statement on it. But when I think of Westerns and I think of like the tones and the colors in a Western, I don't think of them as particularly vibrant necessarily. But in this film, I found that there was like a lot of jewel tones, and it was just... the colors were very vivid in a way that I actually assume, as much as I always shit on Wes Anderson, this kind of reminded me of like if Wes Anderson did a Western, but like a good one, like a good version of Wes Anderson, one that I would like. I think this would be it, because like there's just such a quality to how
the way it's edited.
Exactly. Yeah. And, I wasn't that for me is kind of bringing it all together, is how it just becomes a different type of Western. And I think that is what intrigues me the most about this movie beyond anything else really is how it was shot and made to look like not a Western at all. But yet the story is obviously the makeup, the styling, the script, which we will talk about in a second. It is all very much so in the Western vein. But everything else about it, like the way it's shot, the way that it's edited together, it it leans more quirky unicycle indie Wes Anderson styles than it does anything else to me. And that is just so interesting. But let's talk about the script, though, Dakota. I assume you're going to be very positive about it. I have to admit, I didn't really like the script that much. I found it to be a little bit not cutesy, but I found it to be a little bit too twee at times, and a bit too like. I know that when you're writing dialogue, a majority of the time that's not how we talk in real life, but normally I can kind of get over that. But in this one, for some reason, I just found it didn't. However, I would say maybe that was very intentional, that it is like a storybook that they're trying to tell you. And it's like you're reading a storybook. And that's kind of the effect that I got from this movie more than anything else. But willing to hear you change my mind here, Dakota.
No, I think the script itself on a whole is, pretty basic as far as what types of tropes they're playing with, as far as unrequited love and a young boy chasing after a girl, hoping to convince her to love him back, that sort of thing. But there's a couple of key moments that I really appreciate in this movie that I thought were unique storytelling moments. John Maclean also wrote the screenplay. The first one was when Jay and Silas are going through their journey and they come across a fallen tree and they realize that there is a skeleton underneath it holding an axe, and they have to laugh at it because this guy chopped down a tree that ended up killing him. And it was just so funny the way that they're like, it's kind of funny, isn't it? And they're like, no, it's not. Actually, you know what? Yeah, it is kind of funny. And so it was like little moments like that where I really appreciate it. Or later on, when we're spending a bit of time with Ben Mendelsohn's gang, one of the older guys in his gang tells this story of a younger guy who believed himself to be the best assassin in the West or whatever, but he didn't have a wanted dead or alive poster. So this guy makes him a wanted poster for him. And they do this great storytelling effect where he's retelling the story, so we see it play out like a reenactment, but this one guy is doing all the voices, and it kind of looks a bit like bad dubbing because it's like you're mixing what probably was actually said with how the guy's telling the story. It's just a really fun, clever way of recounting a story that I appreciated. It was just little moments like that I really liked, how the direction and the screenplay, which was both Maclean, sort of came together to give a bit of a unique voice.
Jericho, any thoughts about the screenplay and just the screenplay, not and anything else?
To sort of piggyback on what Dakota was saying, I laughed out loud unexpectedly at so many parts, and I think you were talking about how it's not so naturalistic, and I think how stylized it was, or it felt to me very stylized. I think that supported everything else about what the film was trying to achieve or how it was going about telling its story. So I really appreciated those little segments of, it didn't feel like a linear in the sense that there was like an overarching, I don't know how to say, maybe a tone, like it was very segmented for me. But yeah, I enjoyed it. I laughed out loud. The salt in the wound made me laugh.
That was another thing I want to touch on. Yeah,
I think just because it said salt, and then he's just like, like, I don't know why I'm laughing. This is a devastating moment, but it was. I laughed at that, and then the butt shot at the end.
Yeah, that was really funny. I rewound it a couple times because I was like, why is that there?
Right.
But I feel like, though, in a sense, as Dakota said, this was written by John Maclean and obviously directed by him. And it does kind of fall in line with I almost like the Scottish humor, the Scottish sensibility of what is funny, and like the ridiculousness of any situation can be a bit humorous. And so this movie, I actually completely agree with you. It's not so funny, but it's a lot funnier than you would ever expect. Even in the first few moments of this movie, you're not thinking that you're going to be laughing later. But even Ben Mendelsohn showing up in like a massive pimp coat in the way that they shot it, like that's hilarious, just in the way that they had him going there. But I found it to be, it does work, as much as I did say, like I have a bit of gripes with the script. Although now that I think about it a little bit, and I think about how, Dakota, you mentioned this movie does reference kind of classic Westerns a lot. Westerns, I don't think, like, Westerns have that same kind of more stilted dialogue. It's very dramatic, very melodramatic in its own way, and they like one-liners and that kind of a thing. And so I suppose in a way that the script itself is also a bit of a callback to some of those older Western tropes that we've come to know and love for the genre. Maybe not love, but we've come to know them, because depending on how you feel about the Western films. I want to talk about the music, though, because I think alongside the cinematography and the performances, the music does a lot in terms of creating this storybook or dreamlike fantasy. And there are moments that we actually do go into dream sequences, but they're not done in a particularly hazy dream, fever dream type of way. But the music is not at all what I associate the music to be for a Western film. I typically associate Western films with having a bit more of a dramatic score, something that is a little bit more operatic, operatic is a good way of saying it. Whereas this one felt very light and very bouncy. Again, just nothing that I would associate with it. And so for you guys, how do you think that the music manipulates is a bit of a negative word, but like, how do you think the music manipulates us as an audience as we go into this film, into the different scenes and into the overall tone of the film? Who did I start with before? I think I started Dakota. So Jericho, why don't we go with you?
I think it was like, as soon as I heard the music paired with everything else, it immediately reset my expectations for the film. And then the one that's like the motif that stood out to me was when they're on the horse. I think there's like those few bars that just play every time they're traveling. And that was what hooked me into, this is their love story, and I will die believing this is their love story. But yeah, to your point about the whimsy, I think the music really contributed to that. And it was not what I was expecting. It was beautiful. And I thought it really supported everything else that was going on.
You know how there's some scores that you hear and you're like, I want a copy of that because I want to. Babylon is one. Dakota and we talk about it a lot, where it's just you have it playing in the background because it is such a good piece of music no matter what. I feel like there's other types of scores, and this is one of them, where you don't necessarily want to listen to it on its own, just how is it, but it fits in. It's like tailor-made for every single scene, and like every note is delivering something in the scene to contribute to the overall film. And I find that kind of interesting. But anyway, sorry, Dakota, I cut into what was supposed to be your time to talk about the score.
That's all right. I actually didn't clock the music that much.
Really?
So I don't know. I think I need something that like really blow me away for me to take note of it. And from what I recall, it was good and it worked with the movie, but I don't have anything interesting to say, unfortunately.
Do you think, okay, so I've heard some people say if you can notice the music in a movie, then it's not good. Like, that's not a good thing that you should be able to clock, because it should just be something that's kind of in the background and something that just kind of guides you through the film. Do you think that that's more effective, or actually, because I don't think that that's correct when people
I think
say
that's
it that
bullshit.
way. Yeah, I don't really agree with people saying that, but it's interesting to me, Dakota, that you say like you didn't necessarily notice the music, but for me, the music was so prominent in this movie. Like, it really, really stuck out to me as something, because I don't know why, really, but obviously it would have done its job with you in terms of getting you to feel a certain way within as you're viewing the film.
Yeah, I also agree with the both of you that just because you notice a score, that doesn't mean it's bad. Can that be the case? Absolutely, but it wasn't the case with with most of the movies that I watch or scores that I enjoy. It's just, yeah, I don't know. I think it suited the movie. It did what it needed to do, but for some reason, I didn't end up clocking it. I didn't make any notes about it. I can't remember a melody or theme from it. So yeah, I just
That's so
don't really have
interesting.
much else I can add about it. Yeah.
I find that so fascinating that we watched the same movie and it was so prominent to me, but I think that's fascinating that we kind of one literally took everything from it and you are like, no, it was just music playing. Like, I think that's so fascinating. I have one last question, but it is like a bit of just like a fun little thing. So I'm going to throw it to you guys. Is there anything else that I haven't brought up about the film, the filmmaking that you guys want to talk about?
I would say the final shootout is quite brutal, and I thought was shot in a very beautiful way. And one that I really liked. I don't want to kind of spoil the movie too much about who lives and who dies and how it all ends, but I will say the way it was all shot, I really felt the danger for everyone involved throughout the whole thing. And there was a very clever hook to sort of eliminate the bad guys, so to speak.
I found it very superhero in a way, like it, and just the way that it plays out, but in a great way. Like I think it's in, I think it's done in just like this really, really lovely way. But yeah, I agree. I think it's one of the great shootouts, but not done in a typical way. Like it's not done in the typical Western way. It is brutal, but it is kind of stylized, like it's artistic brutal. And there is something really interesting about that. Yeah, that's a good thing to bring up. Jericho, how about you?
Yeah, the last shootout was like you mentioned that it was very stylized, and I think for me everything about the movie in a good way called attention to itself, like the way, like the cinematography, the music, everything was just sort of like I think John Maclean was just flexing like, hey, I can make a good movie. Here it is. And no, I really enjoyed, there's that when the gang was like popping out of the tall grass one by one, and it looked like a whack-a-mole.
Yeah.
I was like, I love this movie.
It brings a lot of like fun to it. Like you don't necessarily.
It's so enjoyable.
Yeah, it's enjoyable seeing those guys get all shot up and stuff like that. And then, like, you brought that up, Jericho. There's a shot of a random butt at the end.
Yeah,
and you're just like, oh, okay. Like, and it makes the movie, I think, I suppose, not take itself so seriously, but it is a very serious movie, though. Like, it never loses its edge of trying to be, comedic or
and it doesn't really get in its own way with trying to insert or like trying to like the style doesn't undermine the narrative.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. That's a really good way to put it. Okay, so the last question I wanted to ask you guys, because we were talking about like a superhero movie, or how Westerns and superhero movies have kind of become a bit tied to one another now, and looking at this movie as something a little bit different in the genre. And of course, when can we date back Westerns to? Dakota, I'm asking you, like back to what actually, even Jericho, you studied this. When did the first Westerns kind of pop up in America and in Hollywood? 60s?
Oh, I feel like the first movies were Westerns, like stuff like The Great Train Robbery.
Yeah, fair.
So yeah, Westerns have been a part of American filmmaking since the very beginning.
So my thing would be, if you guys were to see, because we've seen the kind of inception of the superhero genre as we have been alive, like we saw it. Actually, maybe Jericho's a little bit too young, but we kind of basically saw the current era that we have of superhero movies become what it is. What is a superhero character, or even just like a movie that, like, in say 20-30 years time, you would like to see them do something like a slow West, like something like it's like a superhero movie, but it's not a superhero movie at the same time, and it takes on a very different tone to it than we see. Not necessarily a darker tone, like not a Dark Knight kind of thing. But we'll keep going with the word whimsical. Is there a particular superhero character that you would like to see get that type of treatment in, say, 30 years' time?
That's really tough.
I would say Batman.
Batman was my answer too.
Just because you kind of see it in, what's that one show? The Brave and the Bold.
Okay.
I think it's very outrageous in terms of, like, in comparison to the Batman animated series, Batman Beyond. So I think Batman could do whimsy.
I think so too. And in, like, not a campy, like, not necessarily the Adam West.
But even campy, like with Adam West or even Tim Burton could be some sort of camp adjacent.
Yeah.
I think the franchise has proven that it can do all sorts of, or can fit into all sorts of genres. Yeah,
that's good. I like that. That's better reasoning than I had, which is just, I like Batman. And so I want to see Batman. Dakota, do you have anything?
Maybe someone like Spider-Man could probably pull that off.
That's a good one too. Yeah, Spider-Man.
Because I think we've seen so many different incarnations of the Spider-Man character, whether it's animated or live action, that you can kind of play with it a little bit.
I feel like an animated Spider-Man in a more poppy way, even though I think the two recent ones, the Spider-Verse movies, those kind of do it. But I could see that. Anyways, that was a really great discussion about the movie. And I'm glad that, Jericho, we got you on one that we actually enjoy. Although the ones that we don't enjoy are kind of fun to rip apart as well. But it's nice when we actually get to be celebratory of a movie, because it's better to pull a movie up than to pull them down, no matter how much fun those are. But we'll get into, as we finish every A24 retrospective episode, into the games. So we'll start with double feature. Jericho, do you want to go first? Is that too much pressure? Do you want me to throw it?
No, I'm actually very excited, and not to toot my own horn, but I'm very proud of my double pick. So my pick would be Snowpiercer.
That's actually really good.
Because I was talking about, like, the segmentation of Slow West, and I thought that, like, that's what Snowpiercer reminded me of Snowpiercer, and, like, the different train cars that they go in. But also because they're sort of polar opposites, temporally speaking. Like, Slow West is the beginning of American society, and Snowpiercer is on the other end. It's the end of the world. And yet there's those threads of the humans just wanting to go after or trying to find love or other humans or some sort of peace and warmth. And I thought that's why I picked Snowpiercer.
That's a really, really good pick. I'm upset that I didn't come up with that.
Haha.
I love that movie so much. Yeah, that's a really, really
it's probably
good
my
pick.
favorite Bong Joon-ho movie.
I love it. I was talking about superheroes. Best thing Chris Evans has done outside of... Actually, no, it's better than anything he's done. It's probably the best thing he's ever done. Dakota, what's your double feature pick?
So this was a tricky one, where first thing that came to my mind was The Power of the Dog. I don't know if, Rachel, you're going to pick it or not, but I thought that was a pretty obvious comparison. And then while we were recording, I was thinking about it, and a movie that reminded me a lot is actually another A24 movie, The Green Knight, in terms of its unique filmmaking style, sort of turning the genre upside down a little bit. But I can't pick that because that's an A24 movie, and that's against the rules. Yeah. So my answer is a movie called The Sisters Brothers, which was directed by Jacques Audiard and starred Joaquin Phoenix and John C. Reilly as two brothers who are assassins in the Wild West but have different dreams of how they want to live their lives. It's dark and it's funny, and sort of every scene you don't know what to expect next. And the film also has its fair share of despair, even though it's mostly a comedy.
That's a really good... I've never seen it. I've heard of it, but I've never seen that one.
It's really good. It's one that I think the marketing failed it.
Oh, really? Mm-hmm. In what way?
I think the marketing for it played it up as a very traditional Western, or maybe including a bit too much of the comedy. And it sort of felt like... And as much as I love John C. Reilly, he's kind of been in a bit of a rut the last decade of making really bad comedy movies for the most part. And so I think this movie was 2015, 2016, something like that, maybe a bit later. But it was a nice sort of return to form where you could see Riley doing both the comedy and the drama really well. And it's always nice when Joaquin Phoenix does comedy because we know he's good at the drama. And so it's a movie that it's just one of those movies that's tough to market because it's so many different things. And it seems like studios don't know how to market something that's more than one thing.
That's interesting. Yeah, I'll have to look into that movie a little bit more.
Yeah, same. I love both those guys.
It's really good.
Same. Yeah. I should watch that. But my double feature pick was, it's kind of obvious, but it's just, I had it really stuck in my head of a Western that it feels a little bit different for me. And even though this one is actually a fairly typical Western, a fairly typical modern Western specifically, it is one of the ones in recent times that I've really enjoyed. I love Hell or High Water as well. I think that that's a really great modern day Western too. But the one that I was thinking of, the one that first popped into my head after watching this was The Assassination of Jesse James by the coward Robert Ford. And I think and Brad Pitt talks about how this is probably the movie that he wishes more people have seen of his, because it is one of those that's in his filmography that for some reason it kind of has taken a back seat. Well, not for some reason. He's got a lot of great movies. That's why. But I love this movie. And I think in particular, it's shot incredibly well and just it does all the good things that you want a Western to be. And I think it's a nice, not a contrast necessarily to Slow West, but it's a nice counter in the sense of like, it does all those classic things really, really well. Whereas Slow West does the classic stuff, but turns it on its head a little bit. And so I think that that's a nice little pairing there. Dakota, let's start with you for the Would You Rather.
Sure. Okay. This was a really tricky one to come up with. I don't know how much you guys struggled or not. But if you were a Wild West bounty hunter or assassin, would you rather have a high bounty put on your head, meaning everyone knows how feared and dangerous you are, or have no wanted dead or alive ad, allowing you to work in the shadows, but no one thinks you're any good at your job?
I want a bounty.
Oh, I'll work in the shadows. Okay. Just let me quietly go about my life. I'm fine. I'm absolutely fine. But it would be cool for people to think I'm a badass, but let's be real. You meet me and you're like, no, not so much.
There's something good about having a little bit of people being afraid of you. I think there's advantages to that because then nobody messes with you.
It is true.
Maybe not a $2,000 bounty, but like a $50 bounty or something.
No, like $2,000.
Yeah, but if I saw 50, I'd be like, what's going on with this guy? I'd be like, I can pick up $50 and probably really easily. I'm going to do it. Like that. That's
also, I feel like if you were that good or fearsome as a bounty hunter, you would want to be taken out by another bounty hunter, Like, yes, I don't want to be chopping down a tree
it's all in the game.
And then have that stump fall on me. I'd rather be killed by somebody who knows what they're doing and be like, okay, you got me. You got me.
It's like those serial killers who get caught by like they had a light was out on their car and they get pulled over because of that.
Yeah.
It's like that thing where you're like, no, if I'm going to get taken down, like I want to get taken down properly, not from a stupid thing like that. Yeah.
A warrior's death.
I get what you mean. Jericho, Dakota, what would you answer for your own question?
I agree with both of you, but I'm going to pick Rachel's side of I'd rather work in the shadows.
Yeah. We already do, really. It's like we just quietly work in the shadows. Jericho, what is your would you rather question?
Okay, bear with me. I spent a lot of time thinking about this to make it interesting. It's a little bit long-winded.
Okay.
But would you rather spend a non-negotiable 24 hours with Michael Fassbender once a year for the rest of your life, but you don't know what day or time he shows up, and he's in character as one of his past movie roles, and you don't know who that'll be, it changes every year, or have a horse as your main form of road transportation for a full year, but the fastest it can go is a trot?
Huh. I was going to say first, best would you rather question I think that we've had.
It came to me in a
Definitely
dream.
the longest.
Honestly, it came to me as I was falling asleep, and I was like, "Let me write
Very
this down."
appropriate for this movie, though. It's very appropriate for this movie. Let me think.
I would say the Michael Fassbender one, because that just sounds entertaining as hell to me.
Yeah, like you'd want Steve Jobs to yell at you.
Hey, think of it this way. I'm at work. Michael Fassbender comes and lightens things up. It's my birthday. Michael Fassbender comes and scares me. I'm at grandma's funeral. He's going to make me laugh and cry. Never know.
So then which of his characters would be your like number one pick to hang out with?
Magneto. My God, that would be awesome. He's so sexy as Magneto.
Even though he hates humans.
God, Rachel.
It's fine. I hate people too. We will get along just fine.
I don't know. Maybe his character from Inglourious Bastards. Definitely not from 12 Years a Slave.
Oh
God. He played Carl Jung in A Dangerous Method, so I can get some psychoanalysis from him.
Yeah, that'd be interesting.
I don't know. He's got a weird range of characters. Yeah. Frank from the movie Frank. I don't know.
That would be weird. That would be a weird one for a funeral. Like he just.
What about David from the Alien prequels?
Oh, creepy. I would be like, no.
I was gonna say I
can't come out today.
I could do that. I could deal with that. Are you kidding me? I would say though, like the other option in your question would drive me nuts. Like to have a horse that can only trot would piss me off so much.
Right? I knew you would hate that one because I know you drive.
I would hate it because it's like walking behind slow people. You're like, get out of my way.
And then our winters.
Yeah, I would hate it. I would absolutely hate that. That would drive me nuts. But yeah, I would also just love to hang with the opportunity to hang with Magneto maybe in the year. That'd be cool. I'd take that. Which one would you take, Jericho?
Oh, the Fassbender one. Of course. Yeah. I mean, like, I would be afraid of the 12 Years a Slave character.
Yeah. Yeah. Hopefully that comes like early on and you just get it out of the way.
Or I'll just take an Ambien and we're sleeping all day.
Okay, my would you rather. I actually said, Dakota, you said like it was really difficult. There was a scene in the movie that happened and then I went, this is my would you rather, because I'm really terrible at coming up with these. But once I saw this scene, it just clicked in my head. And this is very particular to you two. I can't really answer this question. There's the scene where Silas sharpens his knife and then shaves Kodi Smit-McPhee. I don't know why I'm now struggling how to say his name. Shaves his face. And so would you rather be for 1 year, you are always shaved by a bounty hunter. It doesn't have to be Fassbender, just a bounty hunter with this sharp blade or knife rather, right to your face, or not shave for 1 whole year. This would also depend on how well you guys grow facial hair, which I actually don't know the answer to that.
I haven't I've had a clean shaved face once in the last, I don't know, almost decade.
Really?
I don't shave. So growing my beard for a year would probably drive me nuts, but because I find after I trim it down, so after about a week and a half, 2 weeks, I have to trim it. But I think if I had to do it for a full year, I probably can get past that, the awkward stages. So growing it out.
You wouldn't want a bounty hunter behind you with a knife?
Is it the same bounty hunter every day or every time you shave?
No, I'm going to say no. I didn't think about that. But no, it's a different bounty hunter.
So 365 different bounty hunters?
There's so many bounty hunters in Toronto. It's just unbelievable.
Honestly, I'll take the shave.
I've never gotten my face shaved, but those close shaves with like the blades, what are they called? Is it there's like a particular
like the Sweeney Todd ones?
Yeah, there's like a particular
straight razor.
Straight razor. Thank you. They seem really interesting to me. I don't know why. I just look at that and I go, wow, that seems like a cool way to get your face shaved, because you typically do it at like a barber, right? Like a barber does it for you. Which I find that fun. Now, I don't know if I would want like a knife to my face by a bounty hunter who you don't know, because if it was the same bounty hunter, then presumably
but don't they have
a friendship?
Don't they have codes like they can't kill you if you're not a bounty? I'm thinking of The Mandalorian.
I was going to say, does that exist? Is that a thing?
Right? Like, this is the way?
I think I don't know Star Wars well enough to say whether or not those guys have those guys have a thing. I don't know. Yeah. I will say, because I feel like the idea of Star Wars has been like bubbling at the surface there. Every time you guys, somebody has said Jay and Silas, it makes me think of Jay and Silent Bob. I keep thinking somebody's going to say that. And I'm like, oh no, it's Jay and Silas. But anyways, yeah, Dakota, we did your Would You Rather. Yes, we did.
Yes.
So that's it.
That's
it. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a great ending.
Yeah. Jericho, thank you so much for coming on the show today. I really appreciate it.
It was the podcast of a lifetime.
Oh, that means so much to me. Well, I hope we can have you back. But before you go, I'd love to know where people can find more of your work, or if they want to follow you. And do you have anything you want to promote?
No, please don't read my work. Please don't follow me.
No, sorry. Hold on. Jericho is an incredible writer. Go to MovieWeb and look. You could just Google Jericho Tadeo MovieWeb and you'll see all of his articles on there. And they're all very, very great and spectacular. You just had not a new one, but I was reading an interview that you did. I think that's your most recent thing.
I have not written all summer. Every time like an assignment has come my way, I've been like, except for the Asian cut, it's been like, no, I don't want to do this. I don't want to write in the summertime.
I did notice it. I think it's it must be from the springtime, because I did read it though, but I thought it was very good.
Thank you.
But yeah.
Yes, you can find me at MovieWeb. You can find me at the Asian Cut work I am particularly proud of the most, just because the people there are great. Rachel is great. And it's amazing to have a platform, like you were saying, to be able to speak to Asian cinema or cinema from the Asian diaspora and have a home for it.
I genuinely, I joke around a lot, but I genuinely am very, very, very grateful for everything, because you have been at times single-handedly putting new content on the site when me, Alicia, and Rose are just like, either where, I don't know, just have things going on and we're not able to do it. But I mean, yeah, you have been an incredible help, that beyond what you will ever even know. We talk about you a lot in our meetings in very, very positive terms.
I always say, if university taught me anything, it was how to read and write and how to do both fast, because I did a double major. And so there was no room to like slow down.
Rachel, what about you? Where can people find you, and what have you been working on?
I'm on rachelho.com and at Twitter _RachelKH, Instagram _RachelKH. What have I done recently? I'm just going to keep promoting the Steve Binder interview I did, who directed the Elvis 1968 special, because...
Oh, that one was a good one.
Very happy with that. So yeah, go and read that and enjoy somebody who knew Elvis and worked with Elvis so many years ago. So that's enjoyable. Jericho, what are your social media tags?
Instagram is at Jericho Tadeo. Twitter is at Jericho Tadeo _ I hate that there's an underscore, but it was taken. I don't have a website. I did take pictures for a website and then didn't build the website. And yeah, those are my socials. I am very bad at social media, but I take okay pictures. So if you want to follow me on Instagram, I take okay pictures.
There you go.
Well, nice. I'll make sure to link to all that in the show notes as well. And this has been a That Shelf podcast. Visit thatshelf.com for more great film discourse. You can follow the show on Instagram, Twitter, and Threads at contrazoompod. Have you seen Slow West? Let us know your thoughts. Send an email to contrazoompod@gmail.com. Thank you to Eric and Kevin Smale for the theme music, and to Stephanie Pryor for the logo design. If you like to listen to podcasts on YouTube, we do post all episodes there as well, and if you really like the show, consider tipping us on coffee. Thanks for checking us out.